It was supposed to be a perfect summer vacation. Clear waters, a family snorkeling trip, and unforgettable memories. But what began as a day of adventure became a nightmare when something brushed against his leg. Within moments, the peaceful reef was shattered by the violent force of a bull shark attack, pulling him under while his family watched in horror, helpless. This is just one of 6 terrifying shark attacks where the victims never saw the predator coming. Watch as we dive into these heart-pounding encounters that change lives forever. On July 25, 1999, the Thompson family planned their trip to the Florida Keys, an area famous for its vibrant reefs and a hotspot for snorkelers. Situated at the southernmost tip of Florida, the Keys attracted tourists and locals alike, drawn by the promise of adventure beneath the shallow turquoise waters. The family, James Thompson, his wife Martha, and their 2 children, Luke and Abby, had always been fascinated by marine life. It was supposed to be an easy, carefree day, like any other summer holiday spent on the water. James, 42, was an engineer who worked long hours for weeks. This family vacation was his break from the routine, a chance to reconnect with his wife and kids. Martha, 39, was a teacher. She always kept their home organized and ensured the children experienced a bit of education, even on vacation. Luke, 14, was adventurous, while Abby, 11, was more cautious, preferring to stay close to her parents in any situation. They had rented a small boat for the day, determined to explore one of the quieter parts of the reef, a spot just north of Key Largo that James had read about. The Florida Keys were teeming with wildlife. Over the years, there have been reports of sharks, specifically bull sharks, in these waters. These sharks were known for their aggression and ability to thrive in salt and fresh water. Though attacks on humans were rare, bull sharks were responsible for more attacks on humans than most other species because of their territorial behavior. James had heard stories, but like most, he believed the odds of an encounter were too slim to worry about. After all, the water was shallow, clear, and inviting, perfect for snorkeling. The Thompsons set out in the early morning, the sun already hanging high in the sky when they reached their chosen spot. By 10 a.m., they anchored their boat and began to gear up. James helped Abby adjust her snorkel mask while Martha watched over Luke, who was already excitedly dipping his fins into the water. Everything seemed normal. They had no reason to suspect something was watching them beneath the surface. Bull sharks often hunt in shallow waters, blending into the environment, their gray bodies making them nearly invisible against the ocean floor. Without warning, one had silently moved into the area. Bull sharks are opportunistic feeders, and their behavior is often unpredictable. On this particular day, this one was hungry. It had been cruising nearby, drawn by the movements and vibrations from the Thompsons' boat. It circled slowly, observing them, but no one on the surface knew. James was the first to slip into the water, feeling the cool rush envelop him as he floated near the boat. He glanced back, giving his wife a reassuring nod. Luke jumped in next, eager to explore. Abby hesitated, holding onto Martha's arm, but Martha smiled and encouraged her to follow. After a moment, both mother and daughter were in the water, the entire family blissfully unaware of what was about to unfold. At first, everything went as planned. They snorkeled, pointing at the colorful fish and coral below. Abby stayed close to her mother while James and Luke swam ahead. They marveled at the underwater world, completely engrossed in the beauty around them. That's when it happened. James felt something brush against his leg. At first, he thought it was just a piece of seaweed or maybe a large fish, nothing to worry about. He didn't react immediately, continuing to guide Luke through the shallow reef. But moments later, the sensation returned, this time more forceful. James's body stiffened as the realization crept in. This wasn't seaweed. Underwater, the bull shark had made its first pass, a bump to assess whether James was prey. Sharks often test their targets this way, using the bump to gauge the size and reaction of potential food. In most cases, they might retreat uninterested. But this time, the shark didn't back off. James barely had time to process what was happening when the shark struck. In one violent motion, it clamped down on his leg, pulling him under with a sudden, terrifying force. The attack was quick, and his family didn't understand what had happened until they saw him disappear beneath the surface. Realizing something was wrong, Martha shouted for the children to return to the boat. Panic seized her as she scanned the water for her husband. Confused but obedient, Luke scrambled onto the ship, pulling Abby with him. Torn between trying to save James and keeping her children safe, Martha hovered near the edge, frantically calling his name, hoping he would resurface. But James was gone. The relentless shark dragged him further into deeper water, where the blood clouded the once clear sea. Bull sharks are powerful hunters who rarely let go once they strike. James had no chance to fight back, his body limping as the predator took him further into its territory. Martha stood frozen, her heart pounding as she realized the horror unfolding before her. The seconds felt like hours. She wanted to dive back in to search for her husband, but she knew it was too late. The water around the boat began to darken with blood, the telltale sign of what had happened below. Luke and Abby clung to each other, their eyes wide with fear, barely comprehending the tragedy that had just occurred. By the time rescue teams arrived, there was nothing left but a blood-streaked patch of water. The Coast Guard circled the area, but it was clear they wouldn't find James alive. The family, in shock, sat huddled on the boat, unable to process the nightmare that had unfolded in a matter of minutes. They had never seen the shark coming, and now they were left with the devastating aftermath of an encounter that had turned a simple snorkeling trip into a tragedy. The Thompson family's vacation ended in heartbreak that day in the summer of 1999. A reminder that the ocean, though beautiful, can also be a place of unexpected danger. They would forever remember the quiet menace lurking below, waiting for its moment to strike. The waters off Australia's Great Barrier Reef are world-renowned, a destination for divers seeking an underwater paradise. Stretching over 1,400 miles, the reef is a massive ecosystem, teeming with marine life from colorful coral to an array of fish and larger predators. This place was familiar and awe-inspiring for those like John Willis, a seasoned diver. John, 38, had spent years exploring these waters, confident in his skills and ocean knowledge. Despite the dangers lurking beneath the surface, he had completed dozens of dives, some solo. It was November 14, 1997, when John decided to embark on his last solo dive. The day started like any other, with John preparing his equipment early in the morning. He had chosen a remote section of the reef, far from the usual tourist spots, hoping to explore parts of the ocean few had seen. His dive guide, a local named Peter, had warned him that this area wasn't without risks. Peter knew these waters well, especially the predators that called it home. Tiger sharks in particular were known to frequent this part of the reef. Unlike other shark species, tiger sharks were unpredictable, and their diet included anything they could find. Reports of tiger shark attacks were rare but not unheard of in this region. Confident in his experience, John brushed off the warnings, eager to start. By mid-morning, he descended into the depths, leaving Peter on the above boat. The water was clear, and the visibility allowed him to see the reef in all its glory. John moved slowly, adjusting his breathing as he swam deeper, marveling at the vibrant coral formations and schools of fish. He had brought his underwater camera, stopping occasionally to capture the stunning marine life. The world around him was silent except for the rhythmic sound of his breathing through the regulator. For the first 30 minutes, everything went smoothly. John was in his element, navigating through crevices and exploring the reef. He knew how to read the signs in the water, keeping track of his depth and the air in his tank. But as he ventured farther, he became increasingly distracted by the beauty around him. The further he went, the more remote the area became. Peter's warnings echoed in his mind, but John pushed them aside, captivated by the scene unfolding before him. Without realizing it, John had ventured too deep. His watch beeped, signaling it was time to start his ascent, but he ignored it. Just a few more minutes, he thought. There was always something new to see, something worth capturing. What he didn't notice was the shadow moving in the distance. Tiger sharks are known to patrol these waters. Their size and power make them one of the ocean's most formidable predators. They often hunt by surprise, lurking in the shadows before launching a sudden, aggressive attack. On that day, a large tiger shark had been prowling the area. It had noticed John long before he realized it was there. These sharks are patient, often following their prey for a time, waiting for the right moment to strike. John felt the first sign of danger as a sudden current shifted the water around him. He turned quickly but saw nothing. His instincts kicked in, and he decided to head back to the surface. But before he could make a move, the shark attacked. The strike was fast and violent. The shark's powerful jaws clamped down on John's arm, sending a shock of pain through his body. The force severed his air hose, cutting off his supply of oxygen. John's mask flooded with water and his vision blurred. Panic set in as he struggled to free himself from the shark's grip. He kicked desperately, trying to reach the surface, but the tiger shark was relentless. It dragged him deeper into the dark, cold water, pulling him away from any hope of escape. John's mind raced as he fought for his life. He knew his chances of survival were slipping away with each second. The water pressure increased as the shark pulled him further into the depths, and his lungs screamed for air. He tried to fend off the shark, but it was too strong. Blood clouded the water around him, drawing the predator into a feeding frenzy. Peter, waiting above on the boat, had grown uneasy when John hadn't surfaced on time. He knew something was wrong. Looking out over the water, he saw nothing but the sea's calm surface. The minutes ticked by, and still there was no sign of John. Peter grabbed his radio and called for help, but deep down he feared the worst. The search for John began immediately. Boats and helicopters scoured the area, hoping to find traces of him. Divers were sent into the water, but hours passed without seeing John or his gear. The only evidence they found was a bloodstain in the water and the torn remains of John's dive equipment floating near the surface. It was clear what had happened. The news of John's disappearance sent shockwaves through the diving community. John had been well known and respected, and his experience as a diver was unquestionable. But the ocean is unpredictable, and even the most skilled divers are not immune to its dangers. The tiger shark had struck without warning, and John had been powerless to stop it. In the days that followed, authorities continued their search, but John's body was never recovered. The ocean had claimed him, and the tiger shark had dragged him too deep for anyone to find. It was a tragic end to a man who had spent his life exploring the sea, and the incident served as a stark reminder of the risks that come with diving, especially in the untamed waters of the Great Barrier Reef. It was September 3, 1995, when Megan and Tom Alder arrived at a small, secluded beach in the Bahamas to celebrate their honeymoon. The island they chose was part of the Exuma chain, far from the busy tourist spots. They had spent months planning the trip, envisioning days of relaxation and nights under the stars, free from the chaos of their daily lives back in Wisconsin. For Megan, 27, it was a dream come true, and for Tom, 30, it was a chance to start their life together in the most romantic way possible. The day they had been perfect. They spent the morning exploring the nearby cays, taking in the sights of the crystal-clear water and the untouched beauty of the Bahamas. The sun had been bright, the weather warm, and everything seemed to go as planned. By late afternoon, they returned to their beachside cottage, tired but happy. After a quiet dinner, they decided to swim Sunset, their last dip in the water before nightfall. The waters around the Bahamas are home to various marine life. Bull sharks frequent shallow coastal areas, especially at dusk and dawn when they are most active. These sharks are highly aggressive and often unpredictable. Though attacks on humans are rare, bull sharks have a reputation for being one of the most dangerous species due to their proximity to populated shorelines. However, Megan and Tom had no idea that their evening swim would attract the attention of one of these predators. It was around 7 p.m., just as the sun began to sink below the horizon, that they waded into the water. The beach was empty, and they were alone, enjoying the quiet, peaceful atmosphere. Megan swam ahead of Tom, laughing as she splashed in the gentle waves. The water was calm, and the evening air was cooling down. It was everything they had imagined, an idyllic ending to a perfect day. But beneath the surface, something else was moving. A bull shark, likely drawn by the commotion and movements in the water, began to circle closer. Bull sharks are known for their ability to thrive in shallow waters and often patrol areas near beaches. The shark had been lurking nearby, unnoticed by the couple. As they swam further from the shore, it moved in, driven by instinct and curiosity. Tom was only a few feet behind Megan when it happened. The bull shark struck without warning, its powerful jaws clamping down on Megan's leg. She barely had time to scream before she was pulled under the water. The peaceful swim turned into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. Tom, in shock, watched as Megan disappeared beneath the surface, the water around them suddenly churning and darkening with blood. Panicking, Tom dove toward the spot where Megan had been, frantically searching for her. But the shark was strong and relentless, dragging Megan deeper into the water out of Tom's reach. He struggled to keep up, desperate to save her, but the weight of the moment hit him like a wave. He was powerless. Megan's muffled cries for help echoed in his ears. Then there was silence. Tom scrambled back to the shore, shouting for help, but no one was around. The beach, once a romantic paradise, now felt like an endless, empty expanse of sand. His heart raced as he ran toward the nearest resort, his mind unable to process what had just happened. Within minutes, resort staff and locals gathered on the beach, launching a frantic search for Megan. The hours that followed were a blur for Tom. Boats were sent out, and divers combed the waters, but there was no sign of Megan. The reality of the situation began to sink in. The authorities arrived, coordinating with search and rescue teams, but hope faded as night fell. Tom sat on the beach staring out at the ocean, his mind replaying the horrifying scene repeatedly. The dream vacation had become a nightmare, and there was nothing he could do to change it. The search continued through the night and into the next day, but the waters were vast, and bull sharks were notorious for dragging their prey long distances. It wasn't until 2 days later that Megan's body was found miles away from where the attack had occurred. The shark had carried her far from the beach, and the currents had taken her even farther. The discovery brought an end to the search but left Tom in a state of shock, his grief overwhelming. The incident sent ripples through the local community. Though shark attacks in the Bahamas were rare, they were not unheard of. And this tragic event served as a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers of the ocean. Bull sharks are responsible for many attacks on humans due to their aggressive nature and tendency to swim close to shore. But for Tom, none of these facts mattered. All that remained was the crushing loss of his wife and the haunting memories of that fateful evening. The honeymoon that was supposed to mark the beginning of their life together ended in tragedy. Tom returned home alone, forever changing his life by September 3, 1995. The story of Megan's death spread quickly, both in the Bahamas and back in the United States, leaving friends and family in disbelief. For Tom, the once beautiful beach in the Bahamas would always be a place of horror, a reminder of how quickly joy can turn into sorrow. Megan Alder's death left a permanent mark on those who knew her, and for Tom, the memories of that evening would never fade. What was meant to be a celebration of love had become an unforgettable tragedy, a nightmare that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The ocean, so full of beauty and wonder, had taken the person he loved most from him, and there was no going back. Once filled with hope and happiness, their honeymoon would be remembered only for its devastating end. It was September 12, 1998, when Jake Harris, a seasoned surfer from Petaluma, California, made his way to the rugged coastline near Bodega Bay. The area, known for its towering waves and stunning seascapes, had long been a favorite spot for surfers. On this particular morning, Jake was in good spirits. The weather was cool and the waves were strong, a perfect day for surfing. He had come alone, as he often did, seeking a peaceful morning before work would call him back inland. But unlike other solo mornings, this day would not remain quiet. By mid-morning, Jake had been riding waves for over an hour. His body moved effortlessly on the water, years of experience giving him a grace that came naturally. He wasn't the only one out that day, though. 2 other surfers, Eric Dunn and Marcus Green, had also ventured out early, looking to take advantage of the perfect conditions. They were regulars on this stretch of beach, often running into Jake, but never more than in passing conversations. This morning, like Jake, they were focused on the waves. From the shore, Erica Willis, a local photographer and occasional surfer herself, had been taking pictures of the surfers. She enjoyed capturing their movements, using the early light to frame shots for her portfolio. She noticed Jake's skill in the water catching her eye and snapped several photos of him grabbing some impressive waves. Nearby, a few walkers strolled along the sand, observing the surfers in the distance but mostly absorbed in their world. At around 9 a.m., Jake, feeling the satisfying burn of muscles well used, decided to go for one last ride before calling it a day. He had already caught several good waves, but one more wouldn't hurt. As he paddled back out, Eric and Marcus, floating nearby, gave him a casual nod. They were doing the same, each waiting for that last perfect wave to cap off the morning. That's when they noticed the seals. A small group of seals had appeared about 50 yards away, just beyond the surf line, bobbing in and out of the water. Eric chuckled, commenting to Marcus about how seals often brought bigger visitors. They all knew what that meant. Where there were seals, great white sharks were never far behind. Northern California's waters were famous for these apex predators, particularly around Bodega Bay, where sharks patrolled the coastline for food. But like many surfers, Jake, Eric, and Marcus had grown used to sharing the ocean with these creatures, knowing that actual attacks were rare. None of them thought much of the seals as they continued paddling out, intent on catching one last wave. Then it happened. Eric and Marcus were waiting in the water when they saw an explosion of movement a few yards from Jake. They didn't see the shark at first. It was just a violent churning of water and Jake being dragged under. At first they weren't sure what had happened. It was quick and the ocean seemed to swallow him. Then they saw the blood. Marcus froze, his mind struggling to understand what he saw, while Eric shouted across the water for Jake, even though he knew something terrible had just occurred. Erica, on shore, had seen the whole thing through the lens of her camera. She had been snapping shots of Jake as he paddled out, and when she zoomed in, her heart stopped. In the distance, she could see the water swirl with a ferocity that wasn't natural, the unmistakable sign of a shark attack. She dropped her camera and sprinted down the beach, shouting for help, waving her arms toward the few beachgoers scattered along the sand. Eric and Marcus paddled furiously toward the spot where Jake had been, hoping to rescue him. But the sight of blood in the water made them hesitate. They knew the danger. Great whites were known to return to their prey after an initial strike, often mistaking surfers for seals in their sleek wetsuits. Marcus saw Jake's surfboard surface, or what was left of it. The board had been ripped in two, its pieces floating nearby, tinged with red. In the chaos, Eric kept shouting, though the crashing waves drowned out his voice. Then, in an instant, the shark appeared. A massive and powerful white broke the surface briefly before dragging Jake back under. They could see his arm flailing for a moment, but then it was gone, Jake and the shark disappearing beneath the waves. Marcus felt helpless as fear gripped him, knowing they could do nothing. The shark had claimed its victim. Back on shore, Erica had reached a group of people, waving them toward the water as she dialed for emergency services. Her heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to explain what she had just witnessed, her words frantic. Eric and Marcus, shaken but unharmed, paddled to shore as quickly as they could, their minds still racing with disbelief. By the time the rescue teams arrived, little was left to recover. Boats were sent out and divers searched the area, but Jake's body was never found. All that remained was his broken surfboard, floating in the blood-stained water. The Coast Guard and local authorities eventually called off the search, confirming what everyone already feared. Jake Harris had fallen victim to a great white shark attack. The news of Jake's death spread quickly through the tight-knit surfing community, shocking those who knew him. Jake had been a seasoned surfer, someone who understood the risks of the ocean, but no amount of experience could protect him from the unpredictability of nature. The images Erica had captured that morning, moments before the attack, became haunting reminders of how suddenly life can be taken away. For Eric and Marcus, the memory of that morning would never fade. They had been just a few feet away when the ocean turned deadly, and the sight of Jake being pulled under would stay with them forever. The waves they had loved, the beach they had come to for peace, now carried a different weight, a reminder of the danger that lurked beneath the surface. In the quiet fishing village of Gansby, South Africa, Eric Summers had spent nearly all his 45 years on the water. Fishing was in his blood. From the age of 10, his father taught him the ways of the ocean, taking him out on their small boat every morning to catch fish to sell at the local market. By 1996, Eric had built a life around the sea, working as a fisherman and guide for tourists who came to see the marine wonders of the area. Gansby, located along the southern coast of South Africa, was not just famous for its fish. It was known as one of the best places in the world to see great white sharks. The cold waters of the Atlantic attracted these massive predators, who patrolled the coast in search of seals, their favorite prey. For the fishermen who worked these waters, the presence of sharks was a constant but manageable danger. They respected the sharks and knew how to avoid getting too close. On August 14, 1996, Eric decided to venture further than usual. It was a calm day, perfect for fishing. He was looking for something bigger than his usual catch. Perhaps a large yellowtail or even a tuna if he was lucky. With his small wooden boat, Seabreeze, he set off from the Gansby docks just after dawn, the familiar routine comforting. The sun was warming the air, and the ocean stretched before him. His friends had warned him not to go too far, but Eric brushed off their concerns. He was an experienced fisherman and had faced all kinds of conditions. By mid-morning, Eric had drifted further out than usual, the shoreline barely visible in the distance. He dropped his lines and waited, staring into the water with the patience only years of fishing could teach. Hours passed without a bite. The sea was quiet, and the fish seemed uninterested. Frustration built inside him, but he stayed focused, refusing to return empty-handed. Finally, just after noon, his reel jerked violently. The line tightened as something big pulled on it. Excited, Eric sprang into action, bracing himself as he tried to reel in what felt like a massive fish. He fought with the line, his muscles straining as the fish struggled against him. Whatever he hooked was powerful, pulling the boat slightly off course. The thrill of a big catch coursed through him. He gritted his teeth, determined not to lose it. Then, without warning, the line went slack. Eric frowned and leaned over the side of the boat, peering into the water to see what had happened. His years of fishing had taught him to be cautious, but his curiosity got the better of him. Maybe the fish had just escaped. He reached for the line, trying to figure out if it had snapped or something had cut it. At that moment, the sea exploded beneath him. A massive great white shark, easily over 15 feet long, shot up from the depths, slamming into the side of Eric's boat. The impact knocked him off balance, and he was thrown into the water before he could react. The cold shock of the ocean hit him instantly, and panic surged through his body. He thrashed in the water to get his bearings, but the shark was already circling him. Eric had heard stories of shark attacks in the area, but he had always believed he could handle himself if it ever happened. Now, face to face with one of the ocean's deadliest predators, he realized how powerless he was. The great white moved gracefully around him, its dorsal fin cutting through the water. Eric struggled to swim back to his boat, but the shark was too fast. It brushed past him, knocking him under again, testing its prey. Desperation set in. Eric tried to scream, but the vastness of the sea swallowed his voice. His arms flailed, splashing the water as he fought to keep his head above the surface. Sensing the fear and movement, the shark circled closer, its instincts taking over. Then came the strike. The great white's jaws clamped down on Eric's leg, dragging him beneath the water with terrifying force. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. He kicked, trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was unbreakable. Blood filled the water, clouding his vision as he fought against the inevitable. Eric knew he didn't have long. The boat, still drifting, was just out of reach, but the shark was relentless. It released him momentarily only to strike again, pulling him deeper into the water. Eric's strength began to fade. His lungs burned as he struggled to hold his breath, and the world around him grew dark. In the following hours, Seabreeze drifted, eventually washing up along the rocky shore, empty except for Eric's fishing gear. Locals found the boat's engine still idling later that afternoon, but there was no sign of Eric. The Coast Guard was alerted and launched a search, but what had happened was clear. The people of Gansby knew these waters too well. The sight of Eric's boat abandoned and eerily quiet told them all they needed to know. Great white sharks, though majestic, were not to be underestimated. The predator had struck quickly, and the sea claimed another life. Over the next few days, search teams scoured the coastline, hoping to recover Eric's body, but they found nothing. The ocean had taken him, and there would be no closure for his family or the community. Eric's story spread quickly, a tragic reminder of the risks that came with a life on the water. In Gansby, the memory of Eric Summers lingered. The fishermen who had known him for years gathered at the docks, sharing stories of his skill and bravery. But they all knew that the ocean had no favorites, no matter how experienced or cautious. Once you ventured into its depths, you were no longer in control. Eric's fatal catch had been more than just a big fish. It was a reminder of the power of the sea and the predators that lurked beneath its surface, waiting for their moment to strike. His boat had returned, but he never would, leaving the waters of Gansby with one less fisherman. It was August 3, 1994, a typical summer day on the shores of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The sun was high and the beaches were crowded with families and groups of teenagers, all enjoying the last stretch of summer before school resumed. Cape Cod was famous for its wide, sandy beaches and deep waters, perfect for swimming and exploring. But this year, there have been reports of great white shark sightings. The sharks, drawn by the seal population along the coast, had been seen more frequently, leading to warnings posted all over the area. Most swimmers stayed close to shore, heeding the advice of lifeguards and local authorities. However, those warnings didn't matter much for a group of 5 teenagers. 17-year-old Mark Foster and his friends Ben, Ashley, Rachel, and Brian had spent the summer daring each other to go further into the ocean. It was their last summer together before heading off to college, and they wanted to make it memorable. They had been swimming off Nauset Beach all morning, pushing further out from the safety of the shore. The water was calm, and the lifeguards on duty had been too distracted by the bustling beach to notice how far the group had ventured. By early afternoon, the group had drifted much further than they realized, nearly 100 yards from the shore, well past the buoys. Laughing and splashing around, they took turns diving beneath the water. Mark, the strongest swimmer of the group, urged them to swim even further out into the deeper blue. His friends hesitated, aware of the recent shark warnings, but peer pressure and the thrill of the adventure kept them going. The ocean around them seemed vast and peaceful as they swam, unaware of the danger lurking below. They felt invincible, like nothing bad could ever happen to them. But beneath the surface, a great white shark was patrolling the waters. Great whites are common in Cape Cod during the summer months, and they are drawn to the growing seal population in the area. These predators are known for their stealth and power, attacking precisely and quickly. Suddenly, Brian, the weakest swimmer in the group, felt something nudge his leg. At first, he thought it was one of his friends playing a prank, but as he turned around, his heart sank. He saw a massive dorsal fin slicing through the water just a few feet away. Panic set in immediately, and he screamed, causing the rest of the group to whirl around in confusion. For a second, they all froze, staring at the fin in horror. The shark struck before anyone could react. It slammed into Brian's side, knocking him underwater. His arms flailed as he tried to fight off the massive predator, but the shark's jaws clamped down on his leg with incredible force. Blood spread through the water instantly, staining the blue sea around them. The others were paralyzed with fear, watching in shock as their friend was dragged beneath the surface. Mark, who had always been brave, shouted for everyone to swim back to shore. The group scattered in a blind panic, thrashing through the water as fast as possible. Rachel and Ashley sobbed, their legs kicking furiously as they struggled to outpace the growing sense of doom closing in around them. But the shark wasn't done. In the chaos, it circled back, targeting Brian again, who was barely keeping his head above water. Weak from blood loss and terror, he screamed for help, but the distance between him and his friends grew larger by the second. The shark lunged again, pulling him under in a violent splash. Mark, swimming ahead, glanced back over his shoulder just in time to see the shark's tail whip through the water, dragging Brian deeper into the sea. His heart pounded in his chest as he fought to keep going, his arms burning with every stroke. But he knew it was too late for Brian. The realization hit him hard, but he couldn't stop. The others were screaming for help, their voices barely carrying over the sound of the crashing waves. When Mark, Rachel, Ashley, and Ben reached the beach, they collapsed in exhaustion, gasping for air. Their bodies shook uncontrollably, still in shock from what they had just witnessed. Lifeguards and beachgoers rushed to their aid, but the look of terror on their faces said it all. Brian was gone, taken by the great white that had appeared out of nowhere, turning their carefree summer day into a nightmare. A massive search was launched almost immediately. Boats and helicopters scoured the waters near Nauset Beach, looking for any sign of Brian or the shark. But the ocean had already claimed its victim. Only a few pieces of his torn swimsuit were found floating in the water, along with the remnants of blood that had marked the violent attack. News of the incident spread quickly through Cape Cod. The local community, long accustomed to the beauty and danger of the ocean, was horrified by the attack. Brian had been a popular student, well liked by his friends and teachers, and his sudden, violent death shook everyone who knew him. The authorities closed the beach for several days, and shark experts were brought in to try and explain what had happened. The experts confirmed that it was a great white, likely drawn by the seals in the area, and that the attack had been a case of mistaken identity. This tragedy occurred when a predator mistook a human for its usual prey. For the survivors, the memory of that day would never fade. Mark, Rachel, Ashley, and Ben struggled with the guilt of leaving Brian behind, even though there had been nothing they could do. Their last summer together, once full of hope and excitement, had ended in terror and loss. Brian's family was devastated, and the community mourned the young life that had been so brutally taken. The waters off Cape Cod would never feel the same to those who knew the story. What had once been a place of joy and adventure had become a place of fear, a reminder of how quickly the ocean could turn deadly. And for the group of friends who had dared to swim too far that summer, the scars of that day would stay with them forever.